We got to get to the migrants. We got to see what's happening in these streets, man. Did y'all know that Denver has already started evicting migrants? Denver said, listen, we not Chicago. We not New York. We tried to join in on this. We thought that Biden was going to save us, but ain't nobody coming to save us. Make sure y'all hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. If you have not joined the Patreon, the link is in the description as well as pinned to the top of the chat. We got Stock Club popping off this weekend. It's going to be popping, y'all.
Start right now at 9 with the latest on the migrant crisis as Denver nears a breaking point.
In the next few weeks, 3,800 migrants will be discharged from shelters across the Mile High. Well, tonight, we spoke with a group of migrants who are out of the shelters and now living back on the streets at this new camp that we found right next to Elitch Gardens with no hope for housing in sight. After a long journey from Venezuela, Arturo Heder arrived in Denver and was one of dozens of migrants who set up camp near Zunay and Spear. But at the start of the new year, the city cleared out the encampment and opened shelters.
Centro Cívico.
Arturo says he was at the Civic Center shelter. Several beds were set up inside. On Friday, he timed out of the shelter, so Arturo and dozens of others just like him opted for a familiar option. He says he came to this spot because he had nowhere else to go, does not have a job or a work permit. It's minutes from this camp at Zunay and Spear, cleared on January 3rd. 1 month later, he was back on the streets and wonders if more will join him. Arturo explains he's received text messages from other migrants about to time out of shelters who say they too have nowhere to go.
How do they got phones? How do they got phones? I don't understand. I don't get it. I'm very, very curious how they texting each other, they kicking it with each other, they sending messages. I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he was saying that he is familiar with the Trek. You know, I've been doing some research and I've been working in the background for some very, very special shows that you guys are going to be familiar with soon. But I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he was telling me, he was detailing exactly what the Trek is. He was saying that they were specifically catching flights over into certain parts that then allow for them to pay a certain amount of money to the cartels or whatever in order to make sure that they get over here. And then the Chinese people are actually paying more. And he told me the prices that they was paying. And I said, no way. Y'all paying this amount of money to get trekked over here? And then he went into all of the different details of whether or not if you was a girl that looked fine, you might have to give up that box. And he was telling me about the different age ranges. Yo, we had a conversation yesterday. It was crazy. And so it then caused me to then ask myself the question, if there are citizens and people that are familiar with what's going on, I'm just asking a question. I'm not making no accusations. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I have to ask this question because he was basically breaking down the monetization that came along with it, how much that the cartels was getting, who was getting flown over, what type of flights you had to take over here to get, how long the trek was, what happens to certain girls, certain guys, if you couldn't pay, what would happen? And he started breaking down all of this stuff, right? And I said, wait a minute. Wait a minute. If the government is familiar with all of this and they're letting it happen, who's profiting from it? Is this not the literal definition of trafficking? Just asking a question. Is this not the literal definition of trafficking? Is this like taken, but at a much larger, massive scale? And who's really behind this if everybody know that it's going on and we just looking at it and we saying, oh, okay, we're just going to turn a blind eye. If the most powerful people in the world is able to know what's happening, but then at the same time, there's certain infrastructure that's set up in order to allow for it to happen. Laws are being bypassed. Flights are being taken. Everybody that knows what's happening in the world. Because listen, we at the end of it, right? We on the tail end of the situation. So we looking at it because of how it's affecting us. We're saying, well, they want to displace black people and they want to make sure that they keep certain votes in and they want to make sure that they have this happen and then that happen and then the population decline and we need more workers and we need more voters and we need people to lean into this liberal organism and all of this other type of stuff, right? And we have all of these layers of government and they are briefed and have insight, and they visit the border and they know what's happening in the White House. And we go over to these different, they send they conciliaires over there to talk to people, right? And we on the back end and we'll say, well, they're displacing us. It's because they don't want to give us reparations. And so we trying to figure out on this side, but we not really at the source of it to understand what really happens. And if they already know what's happening and they allowing for it to happen, and they basically reversing policies that allow for our borders to be open and fighting the states for what's in the best interest of the American people, we didn't really figure out that the CIA was funding wars, and we just now starting to get movies about it here and in the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, and we don't even care about it anymore. So by the time that we figure it out, it's almost like we numb to it, so it's not even that big of a deal anymore. But we knew, or we found out, that basically the federal government was the ones that was basically fueling the drug war that they didn't profited from in order to make sure that they funded certain things and other people got rich as a result of it. But then now, by the time that we started talking about it, it didn't matter anymore. My question is this any different? Is everything that happened because it just happened based off a circumstance, or is it by design? Is it by design? I'm not saying what happened. I'm not telling you what to think. All I'm saying is, are we really having the right conversations? And is this the platform to even have it on? Am I going too far? Am I digging too deep? Am I on the wrong websites, and am I talking to the wrong people online? And should I just be quiet so that I can make sure that I stay above board and I can keep my platform and I don't have any kind of problems whatsoever? Because see, there are a lot. Think about it, y'all. Listen, I could say every single word that I want to say about you. If I cuss you out and I call you every single nasty word, I will not in any way, shape, or form be reprimanded as a result of it. I could tell you that you are some of the worst things ever. I could hold you accountable. And you know why it won't matter? Because they know that it's not going to change. Okay, so I saved 1 or 2 people here, 3 or 4 people there. We got our chasers. We doing our thing. We continue to run it up. And they will let us to have those type of conversations. But when you start asking too many questions, then things start getting a little bit thick. Start getting a little bit thick out here in these streets. So I'm not ignorant. I'm not unfamiliar. I spend my time reading, doing research, and talking to the people that give me insight so that I can have more information and be armed with the right kind of conversation. So I'm leading you without you even knowing that I'm leading you in the right direction and hopefully opening your mind to the possibilities. So at some point, you're going to have to participate and use your context clues, because ain't nobody saying nothing. But everybody's saying that everything is wrong, but ain't nobody actually saying what the problem is. So now we focused on abortion rights all of a sudden, right? Gender roles.
Denver Mayor Mike Johnson has warned the migrant crisis could cost the city $180 million in 2024 and told Fox 31 News yesterday the shelters were never meant to be permanent.
We literally are out of rooms. There are no more units left in the city that we can use. And so if we don't start exiting folks, we have the risk that new arrivals would also have no place to go. So it is not a new policy. It's just reactivating the policy that's always been in place.
The mayor is calling on the federal government for funding and help with securing work permits for migrants, something Arturo says is all he needs. An opportunity to make a living.
We've reached out to the city about this new camp and the potential for more as migrants are being discharged from shelters. And they said, quote, "We have been working nonstop to connect migrants with resources, which include housing. As for the encampment at Zunai and Spear, we held housing clinics for several days ahead of that encampment closure and then sent city staff and nonprofits into the congregate sites to continue the work of housing hundreds."
So now Denver is basically kicking out migrants, right? Denver is kicking out migrants.